you wouldn't want me welding, but I can drive a forklift if you need me to, kind of thing. But, at the same token, when it's structure, growth, sales, new markets, and, organizing the team and really getting the team to focus on what should be the priority. We're really good at leaning in on that side. So again, we've been just putting more and more focus and effort on that front. When our daughter arrived, that certainly made me look at time in a very, very different way and what I say yes to. I would also say that I'm much clearer on where I'm effective, right? And what I should have in my calendar. And ultimately, in the Dan Martell version of Buy Back Your Time, shameless plug for his book, but I did like it quite a bit. It's a great force multiplier to take things off your plate you're not good at and hire somebody to do it. I was looking for the force multiplier, and I think what I got was actually I'm a lot more fulfilled doing stuff I'm good at because it's more fun, I enjoy the work, and I'm more effective at it. So it was seeking the force multiplier effect, getting a happier, more fulfilled life was kind of the pro and the pro, if you will.
Hey, I'm Brian Wish, and welcome back to the One Away Show. Today I'm joined by Joel Sherlock, a serial entrepreneur with an eye for opportunity and a deep understanding of what it really takes to build, fail, and start again. In this conversation, Joel shares the early experience that taught him how to deal with rejection and how that moment lit the fire for everything that came next. We talk about the difference between confidence and ego, the power of long-term thinking, and what it means to trust yourself when others don't see the full picture yet. Joel brings sharp insight, humility, and humor to the table, and I think you are going to walk away from this one with a lot to reflect on. Let's dive in. Joel, welcome to the One Away Show.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Stoked to do this with you. What is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
What an interesting concept. I've been thinking a lot about this just since we talked about it. And there's so many kind of forks in the road. But, one of the things that came up when I was chatting with my mother, who's a teacher, I'll probably share the one that she remembered, right? I would say that in my high school years, she was concerned not about my GPA, but more about my attendance and if I would graduate, because I wasn't there very much. Let's put it that way. And, in grade 12, she reminded me of this story when she knew I would be okay. I took outdoor education because that was, the lowest. It was going to be easy. You go on a couple trips and, you pass. And that was my PE requirement. And I was playing a lot of sports and things outside. So, I was getting enough exercise, but I missed one of the trips. There was only one left, and I had been of one of two required trips, and then I wasn't able to attend the last one of the year. So my mother, being a teacher, was mortified that I wasn't going to graduate because there was no way I could get these credits. And the last trip was a water rafting or canoe trip where they were camping overnight. And so I went in to see the teachers. One of whom was our rugby coach and the other gentleman. And I said, guys, I know you missed this trip, but we got to figure something out here because I need these credits. And they were like, there's nothing you can do, Joel. There's no way we can pass you. We're really sorry. And I was like, we got to figure something out. And I'm not leaving until we figure this out. And there's a canoe there with a big hole in it. And he said, well, I don't know. Do you know how to fiberglass? And I said, absolutely. I had no idea how to do that. And he said, well, figure this out, fix this canoe, and we'll give you, the marks for the trip. And I was like, absolutely, love it, consider it done. I left, get on the phone. I'm like, Dad, I need your trailer. We got to pick this thing up. I'm going to figure out how to fiberglass some stuff, and we're going to fix this. And, delivered it, graduated. And Mom always remembered that story. I had frankly forgotten it. And she was like, that's when I knew you'd be okay, if you'd figure it out in your own way. And, I think that has led me down a number of really interesting paths, many of which great, and a lot of valuable lessons learned.
Wow. What a story. Super cool. It sounds like you have a liking for the outdoors and adventure, so that's great. But also, you thought about fixing the canoe, and your mom holding on to that is definitely, I would say, a clear sign of what's been ahead for you or since then. What I want to ask you about, though, is you said something in quotes. Your mom said that she'd always trust that you'd figure it out in your own way. Um, I'm curious if I asked your mother and she would sit with us, how she would describe maybe you growing up as a child, it sounds like you weren't part of like the norm in the way you did things. Like there were other ways you went about. Like what would she say to that question and just your behaviors or style of living from maybe K through 12?
So yeah, I mean, if she were here, the school learning, studying, grades, that was a big thing in our house. My brother is a brilliant computer programmer and was accepted to Harvard, chose not to go, and had great grades. I was far more social. I learned a lot by, other people's experiences and my own experiences. So, I kind of have this natural tendency to learn from people and doing, and not learn very well in textbooks or learning from people who hadn't necessarily done it, but were saying, read this book, learn that thing. That really wasn't my learning style. And that served me well. I've had some great mentors in my life. And again, those have been really big forks in the road. And that's probably where, if she hadn't have reminded me of that story, I probably would have opted for one of those tales just to be kind of really big, you know, moments in my life.
Nice. Got it. So, I mean, you said that, you weren't one for a textbook in the classroom, but you were learning by doing, you were more social. Um, were there any, like, I mean, you are, I mean, getting to know you love talking to people. I mean, we're probably similar in that, or at least interesting people. Were social skills something for you that were easy to build growing up, or did they come with challenge? Like, where do you think you developed or fostered your ability to build and connect with people so easily?
Yeah. I mean, I've always assimilated information quickly. I can listen well and think at the same time. So I've always been good in conversations and adapting to different situations. But in reality, one of my early mentors, who's still a dear friend, and he's 87 and more energy than me and still doing deals. But I met him when I was in my early 20s. And, Peter was incredible in bringing me into conversations where, I didn't feel like I had the smarts, the knowledge, the understanding to be in some of the rooms I was in. So I just listened and took great notes, and I would follow up on everything. Right? If I said I was going to do it, there was no way I would miss that commitment. That promise was like the value that I could bring. That commitment or taking something on and doing it well was like the value that I could bring to that room. So I learned so much. And, that ultimately, looking back now, it made me really comfortable, after some time in kind of being outside of my comfort zone, be it boardroom or new market or sort of things that's taken me, or ultimately going back to school and, in a pretty competitive environment, which I enjoyed much more the second time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind unpacking that a little bit more, I mean, you said like you were showing up in rooms where you didn't feel qualified to be in. Like, did you not think maybe at a certain age or around certain people, like you deserve to be in the room, or you had the smarts or intelligence to be?
I mean, when you look at like the imposter syndrome is alive and well, I think, in most entrepreneurs. But when you're 22, trying to cut your teeth, and I'd started my second business at the time. I had a small e-commerce company, and we were really focused on a real estate brokerage at the time. And the guys around the table in a lot of these discussions were worth large sums, and chairman of this company that has 400 locations. This guy has got 100 million in turnover. This guy's worth 300 million. And you're just sitting there going like, whoa, what am I doing here, and what can I add to this conversation? But I was very grateful to be in the room, and I took it very seriously. Right, I would show up on time. I'd be ready, and everything that I said I would do in the last meeting, I definitely had it done, and then some.
Wow, love that. Yeah, I think I love what you also said about like the value you brought was you're not just the commitment, but then the doing and then following through on that to kind of build that trust and respect. Sounds like over time it's accumulated for you.
I mean, like I think there's this like, quote that always stuck with me where there's like the difference between sort of talent and skill, right? And like I can't remember who was saying this, but I'll have to look it up after we chat here. But it was like the difference is like I'm not afraid to die on a treadmill. Like I will outwork anybody. I might not be the smartest guy in the room, but I'll read everything I can on the topic. I'll make sure I'm prepped. If I don't know something, I'll go and find the answers or find someone around me who knows the answers and then, learn that way. But I'll come back, better every single time and I'll outwork most people.
Yeah. No wonder we're so similar. Anyways, and then one more question about kind of your early days, before we dive into all the great things you've been a part of. It seems like being around a lot of money from a young age was influential for you. Was that your first time in rooms with money like that, or was that? It'd be great to understand kind of your relationship. Yeah.
Really interesting. So, my mother was in the education world. My father was, in the zoo world actually, and then got into construction industry and some financial industries. But my parents were fantastic and loving and caring, and I think from an early age I wanted a lot of things that I saw around me, and I got everything I needed, not everything I wanted growing up. And my parents gave me some of that tenacity of like, if you want it, you go out and earn it. And, I think as a 15-year-old boy, you don't love that so much. But, as a 30-year-old looking backwards and now, into my 40s looking backwards, I'm very grateful for that. I grew up on a farm where, for the first 10 years of my life, I thought it was free slave labor, but ultimately it gave me a great work ethic. To fall back on.
Wow. Yeah. It resonates. And Mitch, I mean, the through line makes sense here a little bit. And it's neat that you took those experiences as, hey, like, at least looking back and reflecting, like, got the work ethic, had great parents and models, but hey, I wanted more in life or kind of finding things like I would need to put in the work and find the avenues in which to be able to do that. So cool. Learning things about you I haven't given our chat, so this is good. So Joel, you've done a number of things getting you. I mean, you are.
Maybe some might say too many, but
maybe too many, right? Maybe it's a blessing and a curse. But I mean, I'd love to know kind of once or like mid-20s ish, kind of as you were you got your experience. Kind of, how are you thinking about life? How are you thinking about career? Like, what did Joel want for himself, and how did you think about
the world and everything in it? Right? I was, going to be a stockbroker, graduated from high school, bought a terrible little apartment, but it was my terrible little apartment with a friend, and we did our own little reno on it, and it was our, piece of crap. But we were very proud of it. He then fell in love and I needed to buy him out. And it was like, well, with what? First year of college, I'll check the couch cushions here and see. And, had to sell it, made a profit on it. And then I was like, So bought another apartment, had a roommate, did my own reno, and I was like, I'll be in control of my destiny here. And then as soon as it was done, I was like, I wonder if I could sell this. And so that was kind of what got me into real estate, because everyone's telling you, 4 years of school, you'll be, you're getting coffee for stockbrokers making 30, 40 grand a year at the time, right? Nothing. In comparison to, I had just flipped these 2 houses and made more than that. And I thought, maybe there's something here. So, that kind of led me into the real estate path and to the real estate brokerage, then to, the project marketing and launch division. Started both of those companies from zero to, exit and still operational today. And then, started investing in property, then invested in a tenant's business and manufacturing, and then kind of that pulled me into that side of things.
Interesting. Wow. And you didn't sound like you grew up with a lot, but you had the inkling when you were in college to buy a crappy, unit that was yours because you wanted to run the world going into college.
I mean, when we think back on it, it was like, I wanted to do things my way. Curfew wasn't a word that I was familiar with, but it was one that my parents were familiar with. So I think part of it was just freedom, and I'm gonna get out there and do it myself. And my parents were phenomenal. In you want to do it? I mean, figure it out, and we'll support you. And here's the trailer to help with your move. Oh, can you lend me the down payment? Nope, you got to find that out yourself. And so, I've had lots of help, but never handouts, I guess is probably the way that they would say it.
Wow. Yeah. Cool. Seems like some great origins here to a lot of hard work and realizing what you wanted, freedom from a young age. So once you built a nice little nest egg for yourself of some cash, it sounds like you figured that out and were in control of the life of Joel and the way you maybe wanted to be, or maybe you wanted more. What was, you did real estate, but like how are you thinking about career and like long term? Like you've done a lot with, cross industry.
I was so entrepreneurial, right? And like when I look at early stages of my life, it's like you build something over here, you sell a business, you get some chips, and then you see another opportunity and you put it all on black and roll the dice, right? Or spin the wheel. And, like to me, that version of myself was like, what a wild man, what a just crazy amounts of risk. And some of it paid off for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here if some of it hadn't paid off, but I'm also like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have sold that cash flowing business when I got bored of it. I should have kept it, put a manager in place, taken the dividends, and owned it now till this day. I mean, that's how I think about things now in comparison to old me, which was like, this was exciting, this is boring, sell it and go back to the early days.
Got it. I like where you're kind of mine was at. I mean, what Leo said something to me, you interested yesterday. He goes, if Joel and I lived in the same city permanently, we'd have no money and way too much fun. So, what you just tells me a little bit about, your appetite for risk and going all in on.
Yeah, and I mean, Leo and I think all the money would go into great bottles of wine and amazing dinners, and if we were doing that every night, we would have no money left. Leo and I have had some incredible meals, but it's the kind where you like go home and you're like, oof, that was wonderful, but I didn't love the paperwork at the end. But yeah, some great memories there, and there's a big trend there. Food and wine in my life is a big part of it. Yeah, but certainly the way I look at risk now is very evolved and still far from perfect. I think a lot of people would look at me and still think that my portfolio's out of balance. Not enough boring. But when I look at where it's come from and where it is now, I love the fun. I love the exciting. I love the growth stages and phases, right? And I think what I used to thrive on was 0 to 1. Now I love like 5 to 100, right?
Yeah.
But at the same token, I still like boring real estate, cash flowing this. Those things are not where I spend my time, but I certainly like to have that to balance out.
Text against effort.
Yeah.
When you think about though, let me kind of play this back to you. When you think about, sounds like risk back then, maybe in the earlier years was like all in on like 0 to 1 stuff, or doing a lot more that maybe had a lot more downside to kind of take it all to 0. Whereas now is what you're saying is like, look, maybe it's not as much 0 to 1, but the 5 to 100 is awesome. There's still risk in that, but there's also to protect against things like when I think about investing in kind of wealth, it's, like real estate and cash flowing assets because, they're more stable. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think right now, if we look at like portfolio allocations for me, like the majority of cash that we're generating now, I like to put into safer things. That's not necessarily like my focus and time. I'm certainly, the visionary in our EOS organizations. The integrators are the ones who kind of keep things running and to me are exceptionally important. And, it's like, hey, we're going to make this investment and that's one that I shouldn't be a part of, right? We're still making those, but my focus is in those growth sides. I still love the game of growing companies, ideas, things. I still see problems and think, hey, we could solve that. But I'm slower to say we should now than I used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an evolved, like I think you said evolved. It's an evolved mindset.
Eh, so just scars, right? As Peter would say, we've never made any mistakes. We've just found effective ways that don't work.
Yes, sure, a lot of scars and pain, for sure. Before we dive into maybe some manufacturing and PE stuff that you're doing, kind of given where you are now, I mean, it's been nice to kind of hear this lifeline a little bit on the business side. What's one thing maybe about yourself of like where you're sitting now in this conversation that is maybe the most unexpected to you about yourself, whether that's personally, whether that's professionally, like with where you are, like what are some of the things you're like, wow, I never thought that would be the keys.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like, when our daughter arrived, that certainly made me look at time in a very, very different way and what I say yes to. And it was a pretty tough adjustment for me for some time, but I'm very grateful for it now. So that would be one piece of that puzzle. I would also say that I'm much clearer on where I'm effective, right? And what I should have in my calendar. And ultimately, like, in the Dan Martell version of Buy Back Your Time, shameless plug for his book, but I did like it quite a bit. But it's a great force multiplier to take things off your plate you're not good at and hire somebody to do it. And that was really, I was looking for the force multiplier, and I think what I got was actually like, oh, I'm a lot more fulfilled doing stuff I'm good at because it's more fun. I enjoy the work and I'm more effective at it. So it was like seeking the force multiplier effect, getting a happier, more fulfilled life was kind of the pro and the pro, if you will.
Where and what and on that note, I mean, obviously, daughter comes into your life, amazing, probably changes the crazy lifestyle a little bit. When you think about the quadrant of I got to get this off my plate, what are some of those things that have maybe you've moved away from just in the way you do things?
Like I guess with the way my brain works, right? I'm a numbers guy, and I could go and do the books, but I'd rather reorganize my sock drawer, right? Like, so that's a very poor use of my time. Although I want the numbers to be great, I want to understand them. I love looking at them and I love diving deep into them. But the actual preparation of that is not the highest and best use of my time, and it wasn't something that I enjoyed doing. I can do it, but I really avoided it. I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. So, bookkeeper and CFO are really, really integral. Bookkeeper, controller, CFO are really integral pieces for me to have really good people around me in those seats. And, like one of my controllers has been with me almost 20 years and in like 9 different businesses. So, there's lots of trust. There's lots of, you know, I mean, that's a multiple, a great multiplier for me, right? I know it's in capable hands, and I also know that I'm going to get the info in the way that I like to see it. I also know that when something needs to be double clicked on or expanded on or talked about, I know she's going to bring it to my attention.
Yeah, no, it's I also track with that given the financial overhauling of our operations the last year and a half. So how much stableness and clarity that has brought, as much as I don't like doing it, I like knowing what's happening. So
Yeah.
probably different orders of magnitude here, but cool to see the evolution. So Joel, you had done a lot of work in the real estate side. I know you have what I've found so interesting in our conversations is the level of like technicality, like in investigation, like you like to like dive into complex things. I know you have a pretty interesting manufacturing background. You're doing stuff in private equity. I'd love for you maybe to dive into maybe one of those buckets. Maybe tell us about
Sure.
in manufacturing and kind of what you've kind of done there, and then now we can see what takes us.
So, I mean, now over a decade ago, it was a tenant who had a manufacturing business, fertilizers, and had said, hey, we have 15,000 square feet. Can you build us like purpose-built concrete, 40,000 square feet? And I thought, he has been a great tenant. Let's talk about it. But the business plan wasn't quite where it should be. And, it was big expansion plans. But, anyways, it facilitated a discussion on like, you're going to raise some capital. Hey, I like the margins. This is really interesting. And, we put some money to work and then we got to work. And I love the shop floor some days, boardroom other days. It kind of scratched both itches, right, of the strategic side and the, get shit done side. And, it was a great turn for us, and then that sort of kicked off the two growth equity funds we had after that. But, a lot of it was like, what are we good at? Where can we help? Where can we generate our own alpha, right? Like, if this business needs money and this thing done. And, I've gotten really clear on like, we're really good at selling complex things, right? Like I am not the mechanical engineer. I am not the guy who's going to be an AutoCAD. You wouldn't want me welding, but I can drive a forklift if you need me to, kind of thing. But, at the same token, when it's, structure, growth, sales, new markets, and, organizing the team and really getting the team to focus on what should be the priority, right? We're really good at leaning in on that side. So again, we've been just putting more and more focus and effort on that front.
Yeah. You said, it all kind of tracks back to, it reminds me of the early conversation with your dad and the fiberglass and the canoe, getting into manufacturing. You said something about like being on the shop floor, being in the boardroom and have it kind of scratching the itches of you. But it seems like you went pretty deep in manufacturing to build. You said, go ahead.
Yeah, and but I mean, you've heard me say this, right? Like, in most of the tables that we were a part of, right? I'm the dumbest guy at the table. I like it that way. I'm just really good at putting those tables together.
Yeah.
So when we were buying a lot of that specialty extraction equipment, it was we were financing it, and that was the business we were in, equipment finance, like financing brewery canning lines and really specialty things. And we ended up with a couple of these extraction machines in the hops world for beer, flavorings, and anything. But this pump wouldn't work on that machine. This team learned something, couldn't talk to that team. So I went out to standardize what we were buying, and I thought, this is crazy. Like, why are we buying, spare parts? Why does this team learn something, can't talk to that team? So we should just buy only one machine for everything that we invest in. And then I was like, and then I can get a deal on it. It'll be great. So I called the manufacturers. They all told me where to go and how to get there. I didn't like that. And so, I went to some guys that I know, and my team always jokes. It's like, Joel always has a guy or a gal. And I'm like, yeah, I know somebody. And I called them and I said, could you build me 5 of these? And James, the engineer who worked for an oil and gas company that I knew, he said, what kind of pressure? I said, 4,000 or 5,000 PSI. And he goes, oh, that's cute. And, I started Vitalis on the side of my desk, and it got some early traction. That the tech was really incredible, and then it became my full-time focus for 6 years. As it grew to be the largest manufacturer in the world for that kind of tech. And it was a wild ride, but at a time where in peak years I was traveling 250 days a year.
Like, and that company is Vitalis. You built that from scratch.
From zero.
And
it was an opportunity we saw fit in the market, and frankly, like when it became clear that we were going to need to start a manufacturing business, not have a thing manufactured for us, which was kind of what we originally talked about, is like, could you build this in your current job, current shop? You design it, like you build it, I'll sell it, was the original thought. But early on, it became very clear that we're going to have to spin out and start a manufacturing business, which I knew nothing about. But I leveraged some great relationships, and I had a couple people in my network who were experts in that domain. So, great food, great wine. You could bribe people with that. And I flew to them and said, "Hey, can I have dinner with you? This is what I'm thinking about. What should I look for? Who do I need?" And for me, it was really like, how do I find a good integrator who's going to watch this and who's going to know, what we need to do? Because I know I can get the demand. We've got an amazing technologist who can do the designs. I see the opportunity ahead of us here. I see the blue ocean that's there, but building a manufacturing and shop floor design was just not my experience. But those are definitely things that could be hired, and we found some great people.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What a journey. And I love how you started it with relationships and food and wine. With Vitalis, what was the trajectory of the company? I mean, do you mind sharing kind of the different growth stages and kind of all the levels that
Yeah, I mean, multiple years as like one of Canada's fastest growing companies. We grew it in 4.5 years, essentially, to, one of the largest manufacturers of that kind of technology, in the world. It was a private company. We didn't bring in any venture capital. It was just the three of us. And it was an incredible ride, right? I mean, we were supplying a multitude of industries. So the business was design, weld, install, service. But so we didn't actually do the extractions, but we were powering huge industries from hops, flavorings, fragrances, pharmaceuticals. Cannabis for us was a big boom and then a subsequent huge retraction. But we built everything for the big publicly traded, $1 billion market cap companies. Picks and shovels. They were all looking for gold. We'll just provide you the tools.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have to set up some pretty robust infrastructure.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you looking back on it now, we were direct servicing all of this equipment. We were putting in field all over the world, right? So then you need parts warehouses and trained service techs, and we were dealing with refrigeration systems and different things that you need electricians and plumbers and refrigeration techs. So it wasn't a light lift, and the infrastructure was like you're building the plane as you're flying it, and we were flying. I think some years we had, I think the Globe Mail reported it as 3,600% growth. So it was well timed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would suppose not that it maybe matters, but was this, you were in a relationship at this time, or were you really, you're on the road 200 days a year? I mean, was this a while on the day or while?
I was in a relationship at the time. I think, I am glad that I met my now wife, after I had been through that. I think it would be very taxing on any relationship to manage that kind of travel, that kind of growth, and, with any type of relationship or family. So it definitely has its costs for sure.
Well, it's cool to hear the journey and what you're able to manage and grow. And it sounds like a very fast way for something that doesn't sound like software and is incredibly scalable, but also requiring a ton of people and labor to get done and do the right way. So,
yeah,
good on.
I mean, when we're assessing stuff now and when we're looking at investments, I love the scalability opportunity in software, and we're looking at something really interesting in the kind of preventative maintenance tech world, which again, less barriers, right? You could have that kind of scale and growth and not need to build the kind of infrastructure behind it, right? But it can also be super impactful to the businesses that would buy it.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. And so after Vitalis, you built some growth equity funds. I mean, what was the thinking? So
the growth equity funds were prior. What we did in the Vitalis world is we spun out, for lack of a better term, a corporate venture capital arm. So we were investing our profits from the manufacturing business and kind of getting into building what I visioned as an ecosystem, right? So we got into equipment finance. We bought an industrial solvent business, and we invested in a pharmaceutical manufacturing customer who was using our equipment at its core. And so, for us, it was like areas where we could be specialists of a thing or areas where we had captive demand. So, the industrial solvent business was a perfect example where we started with carbon dioxide and supercritical extractors. Then we started making dual solvent extractors, which used ethanol. Food grade ethanol is essentially 200 proof vodka. And so, we made a machine that's going to eat like that solvent forever. And so we needed suppliers. And because the alcohol industry is very regulated, that stuff is very flammable. There are a lot of regulations as to who can sell it, who can transport it, who could deliver it. And so, we went through calling these companies and saying, hey, we're building this machine. All of our customers are going to need supply contracts for this food grade ethanol. And what can you do? And people were very slow to respond to us. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, we're delivering you clients who need what you sell on a silver platter. Where's the friction here? And, anyways, we ended up finding a gentleman who had a beverage prep business. So they were delivering 1,000-liter totes of vodka, essentially, for vodka sodas in a can to other brands. They had the warehouses, the licenses, the stills. And so we acquired half that company and helped them scale into the market we were in while staying in the market they were in. And that's been, a great relationship with the CEO of that business, the same guy we invested with. He's the operating partner on it, and he's amazing.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the vision. I mean, it's so expansive. I mean, use the profits, build the CVC, invest in other businesses, find good operators. It seems like
find good people. Really, I mean, I can solve all the problems I want, but if we don't have the great people to back it up, then that falls apart.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that and just like your relationship abilities and things. It seems like finding these operators or these integrators has been an unlock for you as you build businesses. And what's been your approach to finding great operators? And do you have any examples or companies that you want to highlight where you spun out an idea and or invest on something and were found a great operator to do it?
Yeah, I guess what's my approach? I would say imperfect, right? I think for me, I always think of like Richard Branson and his portfolio or empire. And there was always something that struck me is like people who like run Richard's airline and they've been with him for 25 years. They still say it's an honor to run Richard's airline. It's an honor to work for Richard Branson. And like, so he's doing something really interesting in supporting those people, giving them autonomy, being there when they need him, but not, letting them sprint, right? Letting them run the thing he hired them to do. He hires them and he gets out of their way. And so, I think about that a lot. I haven't done it perfectly, but, I guess I think about that a lot. And, I think I'm forever a student of how to be better on that front.
Totally. It's the documentary series on Netflix that he has is so inspiring. Have you seen it?
Oh, no, I haven't. But I'm adding that to the list for sure.
Yeah, it's on one of them. Or like, I watched it a couple of years ago. So good. But yeah, no, it's hard to let go. There's no question. But when you have someone amazing, important to do so. So what are you excited about like right now in life? I mean, what, your early 40s, right? Like 41, 42. That's what Leo said.
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah,
early 40s.
All right, we'll say early 40s. So, I mean, you have scaled a huge business. You've invested in other great businesses. Like at a professional level, I mean, you've had a dream career in a 20-year period. And yeah, I'm sure for you, the next 40 years could be even better. Like when you think about like where you are, how are you thinking about what's ahead?
I mean, what's ahead for me? Like, the idea of sailing off into the sunset and kicking my feet up is actually terrifying to me, right? I like learning. I like being on the field, right? I've had a couple of years in what I would classify as like my chairman life. And I am really excited about an opportunity that's in front of us right now, meaningful tech, great product market fit, and seems to play really well to my network and my skill set. So, the idea of getting back on the field and building something, I'm really excited for. but ultimately as well doing it in a more thoughtful way with a lot of, great people around me so that I'm not 250 days a year and the, you know, 80 hours plus that I was doing consistently. I don't think I want to go back to that, but the idea of nothing also is there's a happy medium in the middle for me.
I think it's that question of, too. It's like when you're where you are in your career. It's like how much do you want to be 100% on the field versus foot on the sideline, foot on. But it seems like you can be on.
The playing coach seems to be, like I want to be on the field when I can be effective, but I want to not have to be on the field, right? And so some of that is, we're going through a sprint. It needs me, right? I'm there lots. But then once that's done, I think the quicker I can make myself obsolete in a role, then I'm doing my job well, right? Again, when we have equity on that side, right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. No, it seems like you're thinking about the future in a pretty intentional and thoughtful way for what's ahead. So what outside of work, right? Like, what is what are the things that you're thinking about? When you're not in what brings you with you energy?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it in the beginning. My wife is a very celebrated nature photographer, and so we still spend a lot of time traveling and outdoors. The logistics of how we used to travel now with the 1.5-year-old with us is a huge change. An amazing one, but certainly quite a bit of change. So yeah, I mean, travel, exploring, time in nature. We love those pieces of life. And then, again, like we still travel a lot to eat and explore. And, that's a huge part of our life as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. Where did you develop, I mean, such a rich taste for food, for wine? Where's this?
No idea. I think I think, who knows? Could have been a past life. I'm not sure. But I enjoyed some of the early meals and conversation that was around it. I loved big family dinners where, you get into great conversations and for me, I guess that's just always kind of been in my DNA. But it's also been something I've really leaned in on and enjoyed, right? Family dinners an institution in many of our companies, in many of our holdings, right? Where it's also how, if I'm not excited to go to dinner with one of our CEOs or to, host my team, then I really have to think about, why is that? And, ultimately, are we still passionate about it? Is it maybe time to change something up? Are we bringing enough value? There's usually a reason for it. So for me, I really enjoy that. And when I don't, or when there's hesitation on it, I'll explore why that is. Usually pretty telling.
Yeah, seems like you're also pretty in tune with like your energy and your flow of how you do things.
I mean, super intentional on it, right? And like when you look at OKRs and sort of how we run things, I love that framework. It's good to give clarity to the team, but it also helps me get clarity, right, of where I should be spending my time, where I can make the largest difference, and ultimately sometimes what needs to be done as well.
Yeah, for sure. I love that.
Yeah.
Joel, we've covered a lot of ground. I mean, I love kind of, it seems like some major evolutions over the last 10, even just the last 10 years, and how you do things, lead your life. What are some things maybe we haven't talked about, or things like you maybe like to shine a light on that maybe I won't even know to ask, but you think are important in the context of this conversation?
I mean, I guess lots of things come to mind, but what do you feel would be most valuable to readers? Business stories, personal stories. Maybe if you give me a little direction, I'll dive into.
I don't know. I mean, you seem like a modern day Renaissance man. Like you could have done some crazy trip in like China, and like we would never know. But like,
yeah. I mean, we could talk manufacturing of tequila in Mexico. We could talk about different agriculture projects in Skopje, Macedonia. I mean, we could go.
You did tell me
at some point. So I love, there's a journal program that I really adore called Day One. and also have no affiliation there. I just really love the product, but it's helped me kind of, I love the active journaling just to get your thoughts clear. But I also have kept a lot of crazy business stories we've been a part of, and just truly amazing, you know, opportunities that have come from saying yes, right? And being sort of mildly spontaneous, right? Of just a lot of the opportunities, if I had said, oh, I don't know anything about manufacturing, so, I don't want to go to that dinner, I don't want to learn more about that opportunity, I've been very quick to say, sure, like, tell me about it. What can I learn? And that served me well, and it's also gotten me to some pretty interesting stories. But yeah, happy to unpack any of those.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you told me about the tequila business last time. I find that super interesting. Why don't you kind of share it for us, and maybe how you were approached about the idea? Because I remember a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it comes from one of the companies that we started called Whisk Labs, and so in the Vitalis world, right, we worked with a lot of Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies, and all the way down into large private businesses. But really, when somebody would call us and say, "Hey, what could I do with X?" Right? Like, I'm the largest banana producer in Latin America, and we have this line that processes bananas, and what could we do with all of our banana peels? We used to say, hire a scientist, figure it out, and when you have a spec for a machine, call us back. But it was always on my mind of like, there's some really interesting opportunities, right? Like, date processing. There's a large date processor, and like, there were multi-ton per hour streams of waste of date seeds. And it was like, what could we do with that? There's got to be value in that. And it always sort of leaned on my mind. So when we started Whisk, it was to really explore, which waste streams can we make profit from, right? Can we turn this to power? Is there, value in this algae and that seaweed? Can we extract that lithium with less chemicals? Can we dye those clothes and create less pollution? And so, we really started to look at a bunch of different things. So the tequila opportunity originally started with looking at what we could do with the bagasse, which is like a fiber waste from the agave, because they just use the piñas to make the tequila. And it was like, I don't know if we can solve that problem, and you guys are headed down, I'll join you. It was great meetings with some very large companies that are in that region, and some very smart people, being very thoughtful about what could be done. And really, bagasse is a challenging piece to solve, but the vinyasa, the liquid waste, was something kind of unexpected. If I hadn't have been at that meeting, we would never have been privy to that part of the conversation, saying, hey, we did some work in wastewater treatment, which actually might be applicable here. And then, that brought us into some waste to power applications that introduced us to, I'm a large manufacturer of digesters. And, it's all kind of been, as the ecosystem grows, you meet other people, you look at other deals, and it's kind of just been very organic. I hate the pun with what we're talking about, but it's been really amazing, and it fuels my need to keep learning. Right, like I feel like if I'm not learning, then I feel like I'm slightly dying, right, or moving backwards. So I've really enjoyed those, and oftentimes I'll say yes with not a direct line of sight as to what could happen.
Sounds like you also clear through line here, but you kind of do things, and you lean into the serendipity of it, and you'll learn as you go. But maybe yes, you know the end outcome. And on this tequila business, right? It's cool that the West opportunity, because you told me about that business, has led to this. Like, what do you see for this business? I mean, you're very excited about it.
There's some really interesting numbers in that world, right? I think as well, we've got a really amazing team, that is operating down there. And I think, good boots on the ground, good people in some markets are even more important than other markets. I think, I would classify that as one of those markets, and we've got some great people. So, but I also see, there's great spirit growth in that world, but I think there's also a lot of really interesting agriculture innovation, which could be used in other markets. So, yeah.
Awesome.
And then, when we look at our equipment financing experience and kind of, the opportunities that exist in some of those fast growth markets that banks might not understand, be it factoring or equipment finance or, those kind of things. I think there's a lot of opportunity when you start to like know a market and have trusted people in it.
It seems like you built, a well-developed network. You built trust in the market, given what you did with Vitalis, where maybe your speed to go to market in the manufacturing industry at large, just it can be faster than most. So the companies that you work with, can work on an accelerated speed.
And I appreciate that because speed and execution have really been a big difference maker for us, right? When you say, hey, you know what, I think we can do that, and then you get back to somebody and say, you know what, I've checked in on it, we can, and here's what we'll put together. And usually for us, like, we're not looking to deliver a service, right? We're usually looking to invest capital and build something. So most of the time, it's like we can do it, and we want to participate when it works well, which is kind of an instant alignment, right? We're not sitting there saying, give me $1 million and we're a consultant and we'll give you a plan and then you got to figure it out. It's like, we're going to lace up the boots, be hip to hip with you, and put skin in the game. So we only succeed if you succeed. And so it makes us thoughtful about what we say yes to now. But ultimately it aligns interests where it's like, we're going to build this with you.
No, I love that. I love the partnership approach you take. It seems like you bring that to like any relationship beyond like someone you're in bed with an equity level, right? You seem to care. I think it comes across very authentic and an opportunity.
I don't think it's something you can fake, right? I think you either care or you don't care, and ultimately in the long term. And that's how I look at things, right? And I've had a lot of great mentors in my life, including the one that I mentioned, who's had a long history of doing deals, right? It takes a lifetime to make a reputation, and it takes seconds to ruin it. So, I don't think you can pretend to care. I think you either care or you don't. And I think long term, we do for sure.
No, I love that. And it's at least in all of our conversations, you show up just so consistently. And
I same with you, man. I love anytime you're saying, hey, you should meet this person. I'm just like, yes, that's the answer. And I can tell you that, that's not the answer for everyone, right? But you just have a great group around you as well. So even when you said, should we do this podcast? I was like, oh yeah, let's do it. No thought about it.
Well, Joel, this has been, a joy. Getting to know you at a deeper level, getting to know more about your early days and kind of how you got started was a treat. So thanks for sharing all this. I'm super excited to put this out there. Where can people find you, reach out to you?
LinkedIn, Twitter, X, those are kind of the two main ones. But yeah, Knightsbridge is now, our family office, the evolution of what we were doing at NIM Capital. So Knightsbridge is knightsbr.com. Yeah. So anywhere along those way. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the easiest.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks for showing up. It was awesome.
Thanks for listening to the One Away Show with Joel Sherlock. What stood out to me most was Joel's ability to turn the tough moments into fuel and to keep moving forward even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. He reminds us that success doesn't always come from having the right answer, but from asking the right questions and staying committed over time. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you shared it with someone building something of their own. And don't forget, new episodes drop every Tuesday and Friday.